Pre-pandemic, women's sport was booming.
We had so many people coming to watch us, and the momentum was definitely with women's football.
Who can forget the Lionesses winning the 2019 She Believes Cup, Fallon Sherrick's incredible run at the World Darts Championships, and England winning the Cricket World Cup.
Now I'm just looking forward to getting back to a normal life and getting back to doing what I do.
Lockdown life has certainly been tough.
For parasport, from an international perspective, there hasn't been anything to race at or anything to travel to.
So what next for women's sport after almost a year of disruption? For boxer Natasha Jonas, lockdown has been difficult. She's a single mum, and like many, she's had to juggle work and childcare. In August, she took part in a WBC world title fight against Terry Harper. Millions watch from home, but there's now uncertainty over what's next.
Financially, it's tough worrying about when your next fight's going to be, especially when the board called all boxing off until late February, and you know there's no fights on the horizon. I'm not contracted to anyone. It's financially a worry.
Steph Houghton is women's football captain for both England and Manchester City. The Lionesses haven't played a competitive game in almost a year, but they do now have a couple scheduled against Northern Ireland and Canada.
We're getting more fans through the gates. Obviously, we are building momentum, and I think obviously by the end of last year, in terms of playing Germany at Wembley and nearly selling out the stadium, was probably where you're thinking, right, okay, like everybody's taking notice of women's football and women's sport. And for me personally, as a sports fan, I think ultimately if I get an opportunity to go and watch a football game, I'm grabbing it with both hands when this is all over.
Research by Nottingham Trent University, due to be published this year, has found that 80% of elite female athletes surveyed believe the growth of women's sport has been hindered by inequalities with men's sport. 91% feel pay is unequal between the sexes, and 66% have concerns about the long-term financial implications of coronavirus. Indeed, for women's sport and big names like Alex Morgan, Dina Asher-Smith and Naomi Osaka, advertising is key. So too is competition sponsorship. Vitality has said it's noticed COVID has impacted the gender play gap, with it being harder for women to be physically active than men. Barclays points out that things are difficult at all levels of women's football at the moment, but believes the game can prosper in the future. And Alliance insists there's a role for big brands to play in order to help elevate women's sport. So will sponsorship be impacted post-COVID?
A lot of brands are renewing their partnerships because they see the opportunity in women's sport, because it's such a huge audience, and it's a huge audience. It's over 50% of the population, and if you look at here, 90% of the Australian population watch women's sport. So, there are huge commercial benefits, and I think some of the sponsor brands that have stuck with those sports will the ones that will reap the rewards.
But of course, not all leagues and sports receive necessary funding. For Portsmouth Women's Football Club, times are particularly tough. They've not played since November.
Mentally, it's hard to carry on. It's hard to push yourself when this is your third lockdown and your third time out of football, when all you want to do is play. Like a majority of the girls, their lives revolve around training and games. You work longer hours on one day so that you can get off work early and go to training the next. So it's going to be tough.
And Paralympic sport too has been badly affected. Dame Sarah Storey was gearing up for the Paralympic Games in Tokyo last year before they were called off.
It is a challenge, and it makes it really difficult because if you're also someone who has an underlying health condition or your disability puts you at a more of a risk, then it may be that you've had to choose whether or not to go out and race at some of the more local events. And those kind of decisions, the longer you stay at home, the longer you don't go somewhere, the more anxiety is connected to leaving the house for that first time.
Women's sport has clearly suffered this year, but the hope is that when it does return, it'll be even bigger and better than before.